I should introduce myself. I'm Mark Evans, Purdue Extension Elkhart County. So I'm the ag and educator that deals with plant and soil things. So Mark Evans, and so I appreciate you coming out. It's an awfully nice night. We're not gonna have a lot of nights like this before it gets to be winter and flake flying. So anyway, I appreciate everybody coming out. I have a few more of those printed, but I got a few I do up here. Oh, all right. So we are just a couple tonight. I'm kind of going to go through. I got a little PowerPoint deal I did that's kind of short. That kind of goes over why I do cover crops. I've done cover crops in garden for probably 20 years. I don't have a garden every year, so I can't say I've done 20 years of cover crop gardening. But I've been around, involved with cover crops and things for quite some time, and kind of passionate about it, see the benefits of them. And we're still learning stuff about cover crops for on the farm. And really what's good for on the farm oftentimes is good for in the garden. And that's in Purdue, I think it's 2020, so it's fairly new, has this neat little publication here, Cover Crops in the Home Garden. So it spells out things for you really well. I have 5 cover crop seeds that we've been handing out. I've got a few others in the office too. These 3 here, winter kill, which we'll talk about. That means they'll freeze out this winter. You won't have to spray them next spring to kill them or smother them or till them up or be frustrated with that. The oats, just regular oats like your Quaker oatmeal. The buckwheat is here. It's getting a little late for buckwheat. But if we have a late fall like last year and it's in your garden, you can water it. Kind of guarantee it comes up. You scratch it in a little bit so it gets up. You can probably still do buckwheat. If it dies and gets frozen, so what? It still is there a little bit. And then daikon radish, it will winter kill. As I will allude to this later, I got a picture, but if you did an equation with a teenager and pizza, daikon radish, nightcrawler, right? So kind of the same thing. And so then we got 2 other grass species here. We got cereal rye, which gets really tall. Triticale also gets pretty tall. Triticale is a man-made cross. It's a cross between rye and I believe it's wheat, rye and wheat. So these are 2 grass species, and they will persist through the winter, especially the rye. The rye, the neat thing about it, it will sprout as cold as 34 degrees. It's amazing, but it does. So I wouldn't wait to plant it until that time. But if for some reason you had a spot you couldn't get it seeded and it was getting pretty chilly, you're like, well, I'm not going to do this now. It's too cold. Then you get a couple warm days, it might germinate and make it. So we'll kind of go through some of these things and talk about them. Again, this is my garden from years ago. No-till tomato. I had cereal rye that was like this tall or taller. I sprayed it with glyphosate. I'm not an anti-chemical person, but I try to share stuff so that one can also do these things without using chemicals if you're adverse to chemicals. But I don't like to use a lot of herbicide, but glyphosate is Roundup. Is the glyphosate's chemical name. There's generic versions now of Roundup, so we tend to say glyphosate. About 3 or 4 ounces per gallon of water, wipe that right out. And I use a bulb planter. I have a tomato transplant. I push that rye back a little bit, pulled out my soil plug, set my tomato plant in there, turn this over, tap it, comes out, and I kind of break the soil up around that tomato plant. Works beautifully. This helps to suppress weeds around it. You see, I am getting a few little weeds here, but I can kind of pull some of those out. And I really like growing tomatoes that way. The tomatoes are kind of on the rye instead of on the bare soil. If you don't tie them up, if you do tie them up, that's still, you're not getting splashing of the soil up onto your plant, the tomatoes, for diseases and so forth. So really good. Need to get off the title slide there, but I get excited about kind of talking about this, and I get started. I see the picture and I get going there, and I'm advancing here. Let me get that clicked, and there we go. So I kind of already jumped into that and covered that. That was because it was my cover slide picture, but that's basically kind of how I got started doing a lot of cover crops. As I said earlier, what's good on the farm is usually good for the garden. And this would be like a field this was a field from Putnam County from years ago when I used to work there with ag things more so. And, you know, some pretty vigorous corn stalks here. See corn stalks from 2 years ago. You see soybean stubble there from last year. A lot of residue earthworm food. That's how you look at that. Keeps the soil cooler. I did not set up a soil demo tonight. How many of you were at the county fair and saw the little soil demo I had in the ag hall where it rained about ½ inch of water? I mean, yeah, you were helping with it part of the time. You know, these soils, again, I didn't set that up for tonight, but you would think a tilled soil loosens the soil and the water moves through it better, right? Wrong. The water's going to move through a soil that's got residue on the surface. All the earthworm pores, all the root channels have been preserved. They haven't been tilled and broken up and destroyed, and the water moves them better. You know, in a garden situation, we can water it. We don't have to maybe worry about that quite so much. But in an ag field like this is one of the reasons we do cover crops. A lot of times when we do get a rain, and we desperately need one again now, but when we do get one, does it come like an inch over 2 days or a day or 2 inches over 2 days? Usually, no. It usually comes an inch in 40 minutes or a half hour. Sometimes it's 15 minutes, you know. We get 2 inches of rain in half an hour. And so these soils that haven't been tilled and also have had cover crops tend to, that water soaks in better, and that makes a huge difference on the yields for that ag field. Whether it's corn, soybeans, wheat, hay, it just makes a huge difference on water soaking into that soil, infiltration to get into it, percolation down through the soil. The soil that's been tilled, the water, the surface seals over, and the water runs off. And we got these little boxes that are like this. They're about that deep, 4 inches deep. It is unbelievable. The top seals over, the water runs off, you pick it up, look at the bottom, it's still dry and dusty on the bottom. The one that was not tilled, the water has moved through. We have a little container that catches the water that moves through. We have a container that catches the water that runs off. So it's phenomenal what cover crops and minimizing tillage does. Really, we're trying to improve our soil. And the soil we got, for the most part, is this right here. A pie chart's pretty simple. I really like pie charts for explaining things sometimes. But this area here, air and water, that's really just space. That's really just space in the soil. Macropores, micropores. It's from earthworm channels, earthworm burrows, root channels, all those things. The mineral part is sand, silt, and clay. The only thing we can really influence this negatively by doing a lot of tillage, driving on it, trampling on it, packing it. The only thing we can really positively influence is that organic matter right there. And a lot of our soils have 2% organic matter. Now, if I was to ask you what kind of soil would you really like, what would you tell me? How would you describe it? What color would it be? Let's start there. What color would, if you
probably black?
Black. Most about everybody would say, I want black soil. I want some of that Illinois stuff, right? So that's what a lot of us would say. We want black soil. And my question to you is 2%. That's the soil that most of us have. There might be some exceptions in the room here, but do most of us have black soils? No. We have about 2, maybe 3% organic matter soils. I even know some people it's got less than 1% organic matter. And you might say, well, why are you making such a big deal about this? You're saying the soil we want is 5% organic matter. Mark, that's only 3%. That's nothing. Why are we worried about that? It is something, because at 5%, my soil is black. It only takes 5% organic matter for a soil to be black. If I can move the needle on that pie chart to make it be from 2 to 3 or from 3 to 4, I have essentially transformed that soil and made it so much better. It's because we all know that generally the dark soils are better quality soils. They can hold more nutrients. It's organic matter that's negatively charged that can hold nutrients, along with the clay particles that are negatively charged, hold nutrients. it's able to hold a lot of water. So that's what we desire in our soils. You know, I'm not trying to sit here and say, oh, let's try to get up to 10%. There is a level that kind of flattens out, but reasonably without tillage and using cover crops, especially those that have a lot of fibrous roots, because that's our grasses. One can, and then some of us are putting manure or other organic things in our gardens. You know, you can kind of move. A garden's easier to change than a big ag field, but we can conceivably change our organic matter and get it up closer to 5%. An ag field, a lot of times, best case scenario, maybe 0.1% a year. If you're doing cover crops, minimizing tillage, perhaps using, especially if you're using some manure. And that's not every situation. That's a rule of thumb. And garden, clearly you can change that a little faster because it's a smaller area. But that's what we want to try to aim for, is to get 5% organic matter so we have a much better soil. Because that soil's definitely changed. So here's some soil health. What does soil health mean? Key indicators for soil health. Building organic matter, getting that closer to 5%. Aggregate stability does the, and again, I'm focusing on cover crops tonight. If you're at the, you're a master gardener, so you've been at the Master Gardener Association a couple weeks ago. I had a little clod comparison, and the one clod that was in the tilled soil just falls apart. Across the fence was the clod from the no-till field with cover crops, and it's held together very well. That's what we call aggregate stability. It resisted falling apart when placed in water. And so that's what we mean by aggregate stability. And cover crops help to provide that aggregate stability. We increase, as I talked about earlier, water infiltration, water holding. It moves into the soil instead of running off. And it improves nutrient cycling and helps to diversify soil biology features. So really, it's kind of 4 keys to soil health. And that's these right here. We want to minimize disturbances. Then we want to maximize the following. We want to maximize soil cover, keeping it covered and protected. You know, all the dust storms that's kind of happened the last 2 springs, bare soil. Soil that's been tilled up, nothing growing on. So we want to maximize soil cover, minimize disturbance, and have soil cover. And a lot of us, we don't have a lot of wind erosion in our gardens probably, but still, for a larger field situation, that is an issue. And then we want to maximize biodiversity. We can pick brassicas, we can pick legumes that make nitrogen, we can pick grasses. We can pick all different kinds of species of plants to kind of help us decide and to manage things. Some cover crops are really good at fighting weeds, and they kind of smother out the other weeds, especially the winter annuals when they're growing there all winter. And we want to provide continuous living roots, maximize living roots. That's kind of, so here's one of this was kind of a picture from a while back, but just a February thaw from many years ago. And you just kind of see here how the soil is this had cover on it, but that over there had cover crop on the side. But, you know, this soil can be, even though it's got residue on it from the previous crop, it still can kind of be vulnerable and things to being washed away and things like that if it's on a slope. But a lot of us, we have our gardens in a flat spot. And the area there on the right had potatoes dug out of it. So that's kind of why the area to the left this is cereal rye. It almost looks like it's part of my yard. That's what that cereal rye will look like. It'll make your garden look like it's part of the yard. It'll just be green, just like that. And then I never mix wood mulch in, but this up here, I had a little bit of wood mulch on top just because I burned wood and I had some scrappy bark and material stuff and I wanted to get rid of it. You never mix it in because of carbon nitrogen ratio, but if there's a little bit on the surface, and as long as it's not molded and you got cover crop growing in it too, it's kind of like, it's just earthworm food there. Not something I really recommend, but that's what was going on in that top picture. So I showed the gentleman here, he's one of the first ones in. I hope this video will play. I may have to find it, otherwise I'll put it. No. So this is buckwheat. And there's all kinds of bees here. and you could hear them buzzing and all over the place. In fact, I'm going to just go ahead and I'll just play that with real quick here. I think I can just show you that. Basically, there are so many bees in here, it's just crazy. And you can actually hear them just buzzing away. And, oops, helps if you spell buckwheat correctly. All right, so here's a little 9-second video. Oh yeah, you were some here next week. Yeah. So they're really, how tall is that buckwheat? It was about this high. It was almost waist high for me. So it's a really neat plant. We're getting a little late to seed it this year. I do have some seed here for it, but you just need to kind of, if you watered it, we don't have an early frost, freeze, heavy freeze. It would probably take a little frost, but it would make it okay. Again, if it freezes out, it freezes out. It's not like you lost anything major there. So anyway, that's a pretty cool pollen. So we can do cover crops for pollinators. I'm going to show you a selector tool, and you can actually find things for pollinators. This is a very recent slide from this past fall and winter, a year ago, and this spring. So this is the daikon radish. This is how big it was. This is in an ag field. This is after wheat, and so the cover crop was seeded fairly early, but it was so dry last fall. The cover crops really didn't get going good till about now into early October. But woo, did they take off finally. We got a little rain, and it just was enough to get them going. And that's that. So people are like, are you sure that thing's going to be dead, or that thing's not going to bother me next spring? And I'm like, no, I promise it. Well, here's what it is. This daikon radish right here became this right here. So this is November 1st, which we had a very late fall last year. Like, it did not freeze until late. We had one little early bout there, but it didn't kill a lot. It didn't kill leaves. And this is that daikon radish later on April 1st of this spring. And I kicked over that daikon radish. You can see I kicked it over like that. And look who we found. There's a close-up of it. Big old nightcrawler. Look at all the holes there. And that's what I mean. Pizza for the earthworms, all right? So it really is. It's amazing. They just love it. So I'm going to show you this soil health, this Midwest Cover Crops Council, Midwest Cover Crops Council website later on. That's why I kind of ask you to put your emails down. You can probably find it searching it, but I can send that to you if you'd like. And that's the website address, but I'll just do that. So you got all these tabs, you can find things. This is actually, it's probably been updated since I did the picture of the slide. And you kind of just got to know what some of your goals are. You know, these are several things. You might be wanting you've got years of compaction from doing that rototiller. Bam, 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 bam. You were walking on your soil. I'm a big believer in, like, this is my row. This is where I walk. And I try to keep my row, and I rotate my rows. But that way I'm not walking all over my garden. It keeps my soil better to grow things. And that way I'm walking between my row, whatever it is, whether it's green beans, and so that's one thing that kind of can help you out a bit if you got plenty of space. If you're trying to build, soil structure, organic matter, tilth, there's that. Weed control. Sometimes people are trying some of the brassicas have been shown to kind of help with nematodes and some things. So if you're wanting something green during the winter, obviously you want something that's going to over winter. You're not going to plant something that's going to freeze out in November. And you might be wanting to fix nitrogen, so you could use a legume plant. When is your crop that you're doing now coming off? And a lot of people think, well, I can't see the cover crop until my tomatoes are done. No, you can seed the cover crop, and it can be coming up. I mean, farmers do that with airplanes. Farmers usually aren't flying airplanes, but they'll have somebody fly on cover crop seed, and under the standing corn or soybeans. But this fall, unfortunately, without the rain, it's not been too good. But that happened. That's what the attempt is.
Mind if I ask a question?
No, go ahead.
Okay, in a garden situation, how do you plant that cover crop? Do you scratch it in, or
you can these things here? You can broadcast on the surface for the most part, and do it before a rain, or since it's a garden and you got that garden there. You know, so I mean, because it's a 400 square foot area, 200 square foot area, 1,000 square, whatever the area is, you can do that. So again, it's just a lot of us, we don't really worry about soil erosion in our garden because A, it's probably not that big an area, it's surrounded by sod, we don't have a waterway running through it or anything. So, but still, it's, some of you might be say, well, I'm organic, I couldn't possibly do cover crops because I don't want to use a herbicide. Well, cotton farms down south now for a good while, this roller crimping or cereari, when it's jointed, mean you can see the node. The node is a point of leaf attachment. Once it starts to get that hollow stem, and it's getting close to heading out, it will actually, it's very susceptible to, when you roll it and you break that stem, it will die, or it will not survive. It might not die right away, but it will die. And I was talking earlier, I think when you first came in, I said, you know, I never want to mow that or chop it or cut it because, again, you probably won't have water washing it out of your garden. But a windy day, even if you live in town, wind zips through between houses, and that cover crop, that cereari is going to blow. Might even frustrate your neighbors because you got all this big grass, yellow grass stuff blowing into their yard if you've chopped it. So I would just leave it attached, but you can roll it. If you got something that's kind of rough on your roller that does kind of crimp it, that's better. And somebody said, well, that's like you're compacting the soil, Mark. Well, with the roots there and the cover crop between you, it compacts it a lot less than that rototiller. Bam, 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 bam. If you are absolutely bent on doing tillage, you can till in your cover crop. I mean, you can do it, but you're going to lose you're going to lose a lot of benefits doing it. But you can do it. Because you're better off than not having a cover crop, I'll tell you that. At least you had something growing on it during the winter. But that, again, for organic people, maybe that's what they do. They have some areas that they do till. I used some artificial covers and had some nice pumpkins growing with using the. You know, sometimes, as I said, I try to control my pathways, so I'll use old boards or scraps of material to keep that. So I got my walking path. And one of the newer things, we used to say prescription cover crops for drainage ways and things like that we wanted to farm through, but not make a permanent grass waterway. Nowadays, prescription cover crops, we're more referring to, we have our row, and then maybe next to our row, we actually, where we might be walking through, we might have some clover growing. So it's making nitrogen for our sweet corn or whatever plants we have between the row. That's some things that some people have actually done trying to help with some plant things, using cover crops for other ways. I have also the front of the house, our Putnam County house. This area was really, I kind of got not real proud on the right there. I had some weeds I should have got pulled, but this was an area that just made it into a strawberry. I had 8 plants and it became solid strawberries. I would get 30 quarts of strawberries off of that. Unreal. It actually looked halfway nice. You know, I had a nice little ground cover there. So that's, just don't use walnut for mulch. I did use some mulch for those strawberries. Here's a row of potatoes between 2 pumpkins. So you can try some stuff out. And I walked kind of on the edges there. So tomato on 2-year-old fabric. And you see my foot there at the bottom here. And the pump is not huge, but it's compared to my foot. It's about size 15. It's pretty good size.
Excuse me.
Yeah.
I'm gonna have to leave. I'm
Okay.
very sorry.
Oh, you're
I
fine.
appreciate you putting this on. I wanted to get some seeds sometime. Can I come back here again?
Yes, you come back, and if you tell me what you want, I can even set in the entryway. I'm sorry, I should have got that before we started, but yeah. You can get it after hours or weekend or whatever if you tell me what you want.
Thanks so much.
You're welcome. So that's a little bit. You kind of see here the difference, plastic, no plastic. Plastic's got to be thick and opaque, or else you think you're killing it but it doesn't. Any light gets through, it still comes through. And sometimes you can be let light through if it's really hot. You're trying to kill something in the summer. I kind of learned this by doing the floor mats in the car. I laid them out in the yard. We were vacuuming out the car, and I laid the floor mats out in the grass. And after an hour in the sun, I cooked the grass, but they were clear. And you're like, well, how that? Well, the heat, so that heat concentrated. So you can try that technique too, but it probably wouldn't work too good right now because the sun, is not as direct. Temperature, even though it's in the 80s today, you just don't have that direct and high heat that you would have like on a July day. I just kind of wanted to mention we do have some places that are selling cover crop seed here locally now. And I can't sell you cover crop seed, but I can give it to you. You have to have a seed license to sell seed and so forth. And seed's got to have a tag on it if you're selling it. And this seed all came from from bags. Byron Seeds down at Rockville, Indiana, which is near where I came from before I came here to work. Where our house, Putnam County house is, it's real close to there. So I get down there and I can still get cover crop seeds. Cisco Seeds in Indianapolis. Those are the two companies that by and large a lot of the vendors around here get seed from. I'm not here to say one company's better than another or anything like that, but I will tell you I know that the feed mill over at Millersburg has. I took some of these pictures at different places around here. You can kind of see the price. That's $12, $15, $7.39, $17 for that daikon radish. And it looks like that is £10 maybe. And there's their smaller bag of daikon radish for $4. So what we got is kind of cool because Ron Martin over here on the county road is at 7 or 9 between 26 and 28, somewhere in there. Over towards Jimtown, the feed mill north of Millersburg, and there's if you search Byron Seed Dealers, Elkhart County, if you search the Byron BRYON, I think Byron Seed. If you search their website, they can find their dealers. And there's a dealer that's up towards Middlebury. I can't think of his name right now. I'm sorry, but I actually got some of my seed from him locally, and that we have here. Now I want to tell you some of the no fault of any of these folks. The buckwheat, we tried to pick a lot of it out, but sometimes, here's one. Sometimes you find a giant ragweed seed. It's the same size as buckwheat, so when I see those, I pick them out. A little lighter colored thing. And, sometimes you see a kernel weed, I don't worry about wheat. But, giant ragweed, I don't really want giant ragweed. So sometimes I do, in a garden situation, you can kind of watch for that. Yeah, a farmer, that's something that is a bit of a problem. So some farmers might not want to do buckwheat because of that. It's just a tough thing. But the tag, the bag, the certified, and that there's a tag on the bag. It lists the weed seed content and all that. So that would be that small percentage of 0.05% or whatever it says of wheat seed. And that's the same size as the seed you're planting. It's hard to screen it out. So just be watchful for that. So that's kind of a little bit about. I have another little presentation. There's my contact info and all that. I have another little presentation here that I will. Let me go to Zoom here, and I'm going to share. other screen here. I have another little PowerPoint. We can go through this pretty quickly. Sorry, I gotta get by my mouse. All right. So this is Chris Green did this presentation at one of our private applicator programs. I'm just kind of going to zip through this kind of quickly. I don't think you care probably too much about the NRCS cover crop definition and things. I just left this is his presentation. He did a really nice job. A lot of our farmers are extremely complimentary of Chris and had a really nice little program there. And we kind of talked about already the why and the benefits and some of that and the wildlife aspects there. I'll share a real quick story. The farm where we live here, my father-in-law's used to be that people would wreck in the winter because water ran out of the field and would freeze in the road. We don't really have that problem much anymore because the water's soaking in. It's not running off like it was. But guess what we have now, because all of the farmers around pretty much do fall tillage and they have nothing growing in their fields. I think we had 5 deer hit last winter. Yeah, the deer are just, and they're not like damaging crops or anything. They're there, but when in the winter, when they're hungry, they're going to go to where there's some food. And they're not hurting a thing in the winter. They can come in and eat all the cover crop they want. But when you talk about bobwhite quail and ringneck pheasant things, that's definitely. So we talked a lot about some of the importance here and some of these things. I'd like to kind of just, there's a couple more pictures with the aggregate formation, but he just does a really nice job of talking about some different cover crops. And I didn't do that in what I had. I wanted to just kind of jump to that. So here's the Sierra rye that we do have here. Grows quickly in the fall. It will grow at 34 degrees. As I said, it will grow in really cold conditions. It's got lots of fibrous roots. If you want top growth, it does give you a lot of that, which again, I showed you that for my tomatoes. It's a great, red there is a great thing. It increases scavenged nutrients to keep them from leaching away, especially like nitrogen that's very movable in the soil. And it does increase the concentration of potassium near the surface, which can be, most of our roots are at the surface, so probably not a huge deal, but just something to kind of watch. So if you don't get all your nutrients trying to fight the surface, and you're really low down below. And that's why we don't do the same cover crops every year. We rotate our cover crops like we rotate our crops. Annual ryegrass, it's one that for the ag world is a little tougher to control to get out there, but for garden, to me, what's neat about annual ryegrass, this is not perennial ryegrass, but annual ryegrass, it can be that tall and we can find roots anywhere 36 to 55 inches deep. Unbelievable. Fibrous roots. And it is so it's definitely a great great nutrient scavenger because of it. But determination has been an issue. And you'd either have to completely smother it if you're an organic person, or you have to use some pesticide and herbicide. Oats, I have those here. They're going to great nutrient scavenger, but they're going to quick growth in the fall. And I did not seed oats in here. This is triticale and rye, and I have the buckwheat here, and that's the daikon radish over here. I planted about 10 to 12 days ago. About 12 days ago, I'd say. Of course, I've watered it. It's been outside. It's been here with him, so it's growing faster than probably in your garden. That kind of is a visual for you to see. Can come up pretty quick. Sorghum Sudan grass, I don't have that. It's a grass, so the grasses are going to be your good nutrient scavengers. And you can see the height here that things grow. The buckwheat, that's what I showed you on my phone picture with the bees. It's great for the pollinator, and we have some of that. But it can make phosphorus more available in soil for like cash crops or for your garden in this case. But it takes up phosphorus that's normally not available because of the bacterial symbiotic relationship with fungi, bacterial relationship, I should say, with the soil and the plant. But probably needs to be, we're getting on the back end of that. Berseem clover, it's a red clover. It's an annual clover. It's winter killed. Probably a little late to plant that at this point. You probably wouldn't really get much benefit out of it. I doubt you'd even get much of a bee benefit out of it. But it's a great one to plant earlier in the season before your garden's finished. Or if you've dug your onions around August 1st, plant it where your onions were, for example. Crimson clover, that was a pretty one. If you notice the really red flower on the cover slide he had there, it's beautiful. You see some fields, it's this bright, brilliant red in May. It is a very attractive looking cover crop. Obviously, would have some bee pollinator benefits because of all the flowers. And it can survive winters, but we're getting just probably a little late. I mean, if you watered it and we don't have a late fall, you could probably still. But it may or may, if we have a really cold winter, it may not here down in central Indiana. It does more so, but it's one of those things that again, for your garden, it's not like you're putting a lot of money out there for seed if you got some of it. Some of these things are mixes prepackaged. Some of them like the dealer up by Middlebury, he was willing to open a bag and sell. He'd sell for a little bit more than his price per pound for a whole bag, but he had a scale there, and he'd sell me 5 pounds if I wanted it. A lot of things, not everything, but especially if he already had an open bag and something he sold a lot of the gardeners, he would do that. And I think Fred his little typo there, but the crimson clover is the one that's really beautiful. Red clover is a biennial. I bumped that already. I think I was on red clover before. Field peas, probably not the best to broadcast on. You probably need it's best to the mix of cover crops, and you probably would be better off to scratch it in and take your rake. I have a still weed eater that comes apart in the middle, and I can put a pole saw on it, a hedge trimmer. And I also have a little, this is what I use for my cover crops. So it's about that wide. It's got some little tines. So I broadcast my cover crop seed, and then as long as you don't have a lot of grass or vines from your tomato plants there, because it will wrap up around it. But as long as you don't have a lot of that kind of stuff, and even if you don't get everywhere, you just get where you walk more, and there's not all that stuff there. You can take that and just scratching the surface. We're not doing any real tillage. We're just scratching the surface to get a little bit of soil seed contact established there. Those peas will do a lot better with that. Cowpeas, kind of the same thing. Again, these are legumes, so they're making nitrogen for us. Hairy vetch, beautiful purple flower. It's a legume as well. And it can be difficult to terminate in an ag field, but probably in a garden, you're okay. It can survive the winter, but it may not either if it's a rougher winter. Canola is like the rapeseed, the brassicas, mustards. There's several different varieties of things here, so it's kind of classified as rapeseed, but they're brassica family, and they're great nitrogen scavengers, and they also kind of are good for diversifying your cover crop rotation / crop rotation in your garden. That can kind of help control nematodes and help with your soil biology. Can't say that something always works that way, but there's been a lot of times where there's been evidence of things that it does help. Here's a daikon radish and the oilseed radish and turnips. What I have looks a little more like that. It's a daikon looking radish. Great nutrient scavenger. You saw what it did for the earthworms. I'm just going through this pretty fast. And like if you're before corn, for example, if you got an area of sweet corn, the oats and radish is really good to do because they're going to winter kill and they're more or less withered away. And I've lost it. I don't have it anymore. I don't know what happened to it. But I had a really nice little tool that it was a real narrow little V, high about like that, and to the top of my fingers. And it had a little V in the top of it, but it was a V shape like a row maker, but it's really narrow. And I could take that, and my soil was so mellow from the cover crops and in the spring. I could just run that right down. It's about that deep, so I could run that down through and make a row and loosen up that soil. And I would take and just push my corn kernels in and try to be fairly consistent at my depth. And it was pretty slick. I could grow sweet corn pretty good, and had a cover crop and all that. And it just worked nice. And so didn't till up my soil, because that's what my goal was, is not do that. But if you're trying to do a mix if you want to do a mix for nutrient scavenging, the oats, radish, cereal, rye together, you can mix a lot of these things. You can mix. We got some of the things. This is kind of listed here for an ag field, but again, just kind of think about what you're wanting to accomplish, and a lot of these cover crops you can mix together. I would not mix 7, 8 things, because what's going to happen, they're going to compete with each other. You're going to end up with 2 or 3 anyway. Try to pick 2 or 3 that are compatible. Fall versus spring cover crops. Gardens, we can do spring cover crops, especially if you're going to plant something later, and not have it planted really early, and that sort of thing. Especially if you're going to kind of wait and plant your tomatoes around Memorial Day. You plant something in March, and it's still going to be there when you're planting something, doing good this part of the world here. So I mentioned earlier, I'm just going to touch on this real quick. Think about if you do till in your cover crop, think about it a little bit from the carbon nitrogen standpoint. I said earlier, do not ever mix wood chips in, because wood is very high in carbon nitrogen ratio. It's like up here in the 80 ballpark. But rye straw and wheat straw are in that 80, and it will starve. Mixing that in the soil will starve your plants of nitrogen, because all the nitrogen, the microbes are trying to break down that straw, and your plants will be nitrogen deprived. All these things, 25 to 1, 24 to 1 is anything that or below is better. And if it's a vegetative rye cover crop, that's fine. So if you're going to till in rye, you better do it with more of a vegetative stage like that, not when it's getting to be heavy and it's going to be more straw. Okay, so I just wanted to mention that. The turtles, like how slow it decomposes. The rabbits, faster decomposition. And one of the things we should never if we have good soil health, our residue, our crop residue, our material from our cover crops and our previous plant years, if we're not tilling our soil, our residue should never see its 3rd birthday. What do I mean by that? I should not be able to go out there and find tomato vines or corn stalks or whatever I had in my garden 3 years ago. It should all be broken down, or cover crop 3 years ago. But if your garden doesn't have good soil health, that stuff could be there. A lot of us, we've got grass around the 20 by 20 garden or something like that. We're going to have a lot of night crawlers coming in, just even from that turf that's around our garden, and probably not be a big deal. But that's just something to kind of keep in mind a little bit there. So is just kind of make sure that you don't want cover, you don't want material that's not decomposing. And again, it's going to be, if you got good soil health, the bacteria, the fungi, the earthworms, the night crawlers, or the deep burrowers. You may have a lot of red and gray worms too. They're good, but they aren't the deep burrowers. But generally, anywhere from 1 to 3 species is good to do. And so a lot of times, if you're doing the legume cover crop, you really don't need much nitrogen. Unless you're growing corn and sweet corn, you might need to put a little sweet corn on. I had a person that I visited a couple weeks ago that's having some lawn problems, and I got his soil test results back, because he said, I put triple 13 on 3 times a year. Phosphorus level doesn't remove grass clippings. Phosphorus level was higher than potassium level. The phosphorus level should be about 31 at the highest, very highest, 60 parts per million. I believe his soil test was 187 parts per million, more than 3 times what it should have been. That we talk about, sometimes people point fingers at farmers about causing algae blooms on lakes. Phosphorus is the main contributor of that. And here we are, there's a lawn. Yes, it's a small lawn, but you look around, all the neighbors had green grass. I don't know if they all did that or not, but you add that up, and it's not just the farmers that we are talking about here. So too many people don't ever soil test. We do have here in the office, I'll just reference, we have soil test bags out in the foyer, and for $10 you can do a soil sample. And I would highly recommend you do that every 2 or 3 years and just kind of see where you're at. And we'll check for nitrogen, and that's why I said that about nitrogen. We have to, it's not stable, so it's here today, gone tomorrow type of thing. So we just kind of have to think about, okay, sweet corn, I need to have some nitrogen on that because I need the corn needs nitrogen. It's a grass. Grasses do need nitrogen. But probably, especially if you're putting some scraps on, you're doing cover crops, you probably don't need any phosphorus or potassium fertilizer really at all. So here's some of the sources. There's actually a Midwest cover crop field guide, and we have Purdue Extension cover crop field guide, and some things there that he has in his talk. And I'm going to share a different screen now. I'm going to move this over here. I'm actually going to switch and change my settings and make this so it's not extended anymore. We'll duplicate. I'll just make life simpler, I think. Okay, so we will close that. I need to share this screen. Screen sharing is paused. So I need to share. There we go. I think we're sharing the correct screen now. Okay, so that'll be kind of in the way there. That's one thing I didn't think about when we got the image of us in the room. But this is the Midwest Cover Crops Council, midwestcovercrops.org, and I selected Indiana. So as it says up here at the top, you see getting started, selector tools, species. You can research species, base brassicas, grasses, legumes, non-legumes. Pick your state, which I already picked Indiana, so that's how I got to where I'm at right here with Indiana. So let's go scroll down. There's a lot of this is farmer ag related, but there are some things here that kind of do relate well for gardening. And there's some publications and things that Purdue has. You can look at some other states' things too and see what they have. But in particular, here's Indiana articles and some of the things, but this one right here, cover cropping for pollinators and beneficial insects. I think that's something that you would really enjoy taking a look at. Also some termination when things are unfavorable, which that's probably going to be a little more for ag, but still it's some useful information if you're having trouble terminating something. Most things are, like I mentioned, the ryegrass, you can have a little trouble with the hairy vetch. But overall, I mean, a lot of these things are not that terribly difficult to terminate unless you're totally unwilling to use herbs. And especially when you're in a garden, it's not like you're able to walk around your garden. I can lay a board down in my garden and walk on the board, so I'm not to spray things or whatever. So I'm not. And with glyphosate, it's not a herbicide that's there and has persistence in the soil or anything. In fact, if your water is not pretty clean and correct pH, it doesn't even work. It gets tied up and deteriorates. So we really need to think about what we're using because it's a garden. But you read your label and so forth. But generally, like with glyphosate, a day or two, and you can plant anything in there. It's not going to have any impact on it. But I wanted to show you this cover cropping for pollinators. Show you this website because it tells you to kind of can help you know what species to mix together. And I thought that would be useful. One other thing I want to show you a little bit about spreaders. Talk about that real quick. These are 2 hand spreaders. This is a newer one I got, which is kind of nice. It used to be you held on to it, you crank it, and you know, they're always made for right-handed people. I'm a left-handed person, so here I am cranking my right hand, you know, so I'm whining a little bit. But anyway, I feel like it should be like this, right? But anyway, it's not. So I like this little thing here. I never seen this before. It's got this here. So when this has weight in it, it's not killing your wrist. So especially for people with arthritis, I do. If anybody's got like you have a little sheet that's got garden aids and stretches. If anybody's interested in that, I didn't bring that in here, but I got to bring my office because I just used that today talking with the Owls group. But you want it, you can adjust how much seed comes out of that. Most of you, I'm sure, have seen one of these. You can adjust on the side here, 1 to 5. And what I was going to say was, some of these similar size seeds are fine to mix together here. They'll come out fine. What you don't want to do is put these big old oats in here with your little daikon radish and mix them together and then sound where I spread. Put your oats in first, or second, whichever one. Spread them, and then come back and spread this. So you're going to do 2 spreads. Because if you don't, all this fine seed's going to settle at the bottom. It's going to race out. It might even be in this little small area because it all went out first. It settled at the bottom as you're walking and cranking it. And so it's just do 2 spreadings. If you got different, put your similar seed sizes together so that you get a good even spread. There's also, this is a newer version that I saw that these were on discount because in the season at Walmart. And so I obtained these. This is a battery operated where you can just walk and spreads about 6 foot wide. It's kind of cool.
From left to right hand.
Yeah, it works for my left-handed. I really like that. So have a little fun with that, but seriously, it is pretty handy. I don't know how long it says the battery should last you for about a year, using it for seeding and for ice, salt for ice removal. So we shall see. And again, I have my little container here. You see, I've had little container garden stuff back here, and I use that to take the programs and things. But I got this started. It's not been quite 2 weeks yet, and you know, I honestly am not sure. I think this is the rye and this is the triticale, but I could be wrong about that. And I can't quite tell just looking right here. This is the buckwheat though, and this is the daikon radish. I can tell you that. So that's, you know, with watering and so forth, the warm temperatures we've had, it jumps up pretty quick. And any questions on things? We got the seed out there. I got bags. These are pre-packaged, so they're about 100 square foot. If you say, well, Mark, I'd like some oats and daikon radish and mix them, I think you could put these 2 together and easily do 150 square foot. It might be a little thin for 200 square foot, but you could definitely do a little bigger area. And for covering the program, I'm not like limiting you to 1 bag or anything. If you want to take 3 or 4, my goal for doing this is to get people to try it, have some fun with it, and I also raise some awareness that we do have some vendors out here selling seed and garden size packages now instead of the 50-pound farmer version. So that's kind of cool. Anybody have any questions or anything? Yeah.
Yeah, my son recently bought a little farmette up on Middlebury. It's sand. It's our first year. We have to, you know, get tilt in it. And so what would you recommend for that for a cover crop this winter? I was thinking of Ryan.
It's like a lot of the topsoil missing and so forth because it's been
it's somewhat bare in places.
Just a second here. Okay, so you know, if somebody's scraped the topsoil off, you might want to just double check real quick. I know it's getting late. It's not that huge of an area. You can go ahead and try to broadcast something out on that. and to get something growing and hope it works. But you probably kind of want to. I mean, if it's not got very good stuff there to start with, but I would say for fertility and so forth, because topsoil's been scraped off, I would try to maybe get that figured out too before you really try to do something permanent. But to me, the rye, because it's and oats comes up quickly as well, that you can even mix a couple things there. You can throw a legume in there, a little bit of whether it's of the crimson clover, because it's really cool and it really looks nice. You could try a little of that and see if it worked. And honestly, we'll throw a few daikon radishes in there, especially if it's had equipment and stuff driving on it, to help bust that up a little bit. Bring in some. So those would be 3 or 4 things that A, I'm trying to say things that I think would be easy for you to get, and B, things that that I think would get you want to get some grass, you want to get some fibrous roots growing, help build that structure and break through a little bit. And the daikon radish is good too, and you kind of have some things that get started quicker, and as they died out, the rye would take over. Is kind of what I'm thinking. Anything else?
Usually throw leaves on their garden in the fall. Is that a bad thing to do?
Leaves, I mean, the leaves, when they decompose, they're going to get, they might slightly acidify, so I would never do like walnut or something like that, make sure there's none of them in there. But leaves, leaves are going to kind of make it more moist and so forth. Personally, I would rather try to compost my leaves and then put the compost on my garden versus. And another thing is when you have a lot of leaf litter or even your leaf compost pile near the garden. Trust me, the calls I get sometimes I've had, it's amazing, but that's a great environment for your shrew and mole friends that you don't want in your garden. So maybe have a little distance there, and if you put all that in your garden and they come, that's where they're at. So that's another, in my mind, you're inviting trouble a little bit, because I've seen some really bad situations.
The environmental center has all that composted. Leaves as well as manure, chicken manure that is 3 years composted. You can put that on, and
it's better to compost at first. Your leaves with compost, look, that's another whole talk is compost. In fact, I can't remember if it was Lynn Harms. One of the master gardeners did a composting session during. I could be wrong on who it was, but we can figure that out. But did a really good job with that. I know Catherine was, because she works with livestock. It's amazing. You think, okay, I threw a hog into this compost. There's no way that thing's going to be gone, and it's gone. Fairly short order. And I mean, even the bones are gone. I mean, it's just heats up. It's not. It shouldn't even really stink like that. I mean, it just if it's working properly, the system. So. There's an art to composting. I'll admit I am not the expert on that. I'd have to do some looking, digging, but definitely, requires some, not too nitrogen, not too much water, not too much, not too dry, all that to kind of keep things and how it's packed and all that. I think are all the variables of that. But I would much rather compost those leaves if you could do that somewhere, and before rather than just put them on the garden. It keeps it really wet, sloppy too, kind of. Any other questions?